In this session, we're going to talk about Nerdio for Azure and discuss groups and shared mailboxes. You'll learn about managing groups, group management tasks, and how to create and manage shared mailboxes. Enjoy the session.
Today we'll keep going down the list of the various Snap features. We will focus on groups and shared mailboxes. Okay, so let's start with groups. This shouldn't take us very long. There's only one section here, the group section and the group management section. These are, or most of these, are the default groups that get provisioned with a basic account. There are certain file shares that are defined on FSO1 when it gets provisioned. There is a public share that's open with read-write to domain users, and then there is department shares, one for each sort of department. Obviously start out as empty, and then those departments, department groups, department folders have the security groups associated with them. So these are pre-configured. Most of them can be deleted. The one that absolutely cannot be deleted, and it's really important to make sure that this group always exists, is the one called the IT department group. The IT department group, in addition to having access to the IT share, also has some other functionality. In the new version of the template, it actually has a label here, or at least a part of the description that says do not modify or do not delete or something like that. So when someone goes in and tries to delete it, hopefully they'll note the message not to delete this group. But what's special about the IT department group is anybody who is a member of the IT department group becomes a local administrator of all of the different VMs in the environment. So for instance, the IT department group is a member of the local administrators group on all the servers, with the exception of DCL1, which is the domain controller. So if you're a member of the IT department group, you can RDP into any of the servers and you will be the local administrator, but you cannot get into DCL1 because that needs to be a domain administrator. And to make someone a domain administrator, you'll recall there is a checkbox on the user properties for that to happen. So when a new server gets added, for instance, one of the tasks that occurs is that this group gets added to the local administrators group on that newly created server. And if this group doesn't exist, they're going to get an error message saying IT department group doesn't exist, in which case they need to go in and recreate this group with the exact naming and spacing and things like that. And this will allow the new server creation to work properly. Other than that, all of these security groups behave as you would expect them to. The ones with the blue icon, this little, whatever that looks like, a little masked guy there, that's a security group. When you add a new group, you get to choose whether it's a security or a distribution list. When you select security group, there are fewer settings here than the distribution list. There's a group name, there's a description. You can then go in and add users. Again, this selector here allows you to start typing the name of any user. It will match it no matter if it's the first part of the name or the latter part of the name. And you can also make other groups be members of this group. So you can kind of have this nested membership if needed. You go ahead, click create, and this will go ahead and add a security group. You can also edit or delete a group, nothing special there. Once a group is set as security group, that cannot be modified. So once a security group, always a security group. And then the second type of group we have is called distribution list. So distribution list can in theory be used in the same way as a security group. It could still be assigned to folder shares and printers or whatever resources support security membership, but generally it's used for, as the name implies, email distribution. So you can create a group here, give it a name, give it a description, select the distribution list as the option, give it an email address. Just like with user accounts, you will have your default domain selected here with other available email domains selected here. So you can give it a username, email address, and you can add additional aliases for that group at that same domain. So you could add as many as you want. And then you get to specify the members. So either group individual users, other groups. You can also add shared mailboxes because those have email addresses associated with them. And you can add contacts into the distribution list as well. And you can choose to hide the distribution list from the global address list. Okay, then the next thing you could do under groups is set various restrictions. So by default, any distribution list will be open, meaning anyone who anyone can send to this distribution list. But there are a few other options. First option here is required that all senders in your organization be authenticated. So if you check this box, then only internal people who are part of the same Exchange org will be able to send email to this distribution list. So if this is an internal use only and you don't want to expose it to the outside, like maybe it's the all employee list and you don't want some spammer to figure that out and be spamming the all employee list, so you would check this box. Then in addition to it, or instead of, you can say, all right, only allow people to email this distribution list if they are on the distribution list. So that means that only members of the distribution list will be able to email the distribution list. Anyone else will be denied. And then you can also select whether you want to do a whitelist or a blacklist. If you say allow these groups or users, then you can specify them explicitly, and then you can say disallow, kind of individuals as well. So you can do that by selecting these checkboxes. And that's pretty much it on groups. When a distribution list or a group, or when the distribution list is created, it gets created in Active Directory with the email addresses set under the proxy addresses LDAP entry, and that gets, or the ADSI object entry there, and then it gets triggered. There's a synchronization that gets triggered that then transfers it into Office 365, and then it gets created. It takes a little while after the synchronization happens for the object to actually get created in Office 365. So there's a little bit of a message here that says that it takes a few minutes, even after it's fully synchronized and it's in Azure AD. In order for the Exchange Online object to get created, it may take a few additional minutes, so keep that in mind. Okay, let's move on to shared mailboxes. So shared mailboxes, also note that for groups, there is a date stamp and the refresh button, which means this is a cached list. So always keep that in mind. Same story for shared mailboxes. Shared mailboxes you can either add a new one, give it a name, a primary email address, additional aliases, copy members from another mailbox, and then add members. When you do that, it's only going to give you a list of people that have an Exchange Online license. Everyone else doesn't apply here. And then this important note here is that when you add a member, they'll be given full access and send as permissions, which means they'll be able to send as this shared mailbox. So that's important to know. And also outgoing emails so let's say Andy will then have this mailbox called test. So when Andy sends an email from the test shared mailbox, the sent message will be saved both in the shared mailboxes sent items and in Andy's sent items folder. Okay, so both of those locations. And then by doing this, the mailbox will automatically, after a few minutes, pop up in Andy's Outlook on the left-hand side. It's also possible to access it through Outlook web app. When a user is archived, the mailbox is converted from being a licensed mailbox with an E3 or whatever Exchange Online license assigned to it to a shared mailbox, like for example, the case with Sally that got archived to Andy. So now you can see it's a shared mailbox with Andy having access to that mailbox. You can always go in and add additional members or remove Andy and keep this mailbox with no members at all if you wanted to, which means that no one will be able to access it until you add somebody as a member. And then you can obviously delete it as well. I think in NFA, there is not a corresponding AD object that gets created when you manage mailboxes, unlike an NPC. There are some use cases where you needed a local object for, like external LDAP synchronizations. In NFA, I don't think there is an internal AD object. So any operations that are done on shared mailboxes actually happen right against Exchange Online, and this list gets pulled from Exchange Online as part of the AD cache update that happens on a regular basis.